together so that each one of those newly enhanced data sets has a link to, tell us about the metadata, tell us your suggestions, how might we improve this long term. So great point.
So one of the things that comes up over and over again in these discussions about, especially AB 1750-5, is the act that actually asks the state to be more open and transparent with its data, is that there's all these silos that people sit in, even within the agency that Felicia is chair of, or within the Department of Water Resources. You get lots of different departments and one doesn't necessarily talk to the other, and as a result, you got a diversity of websites that don't really talk to each other, as one example, let alone the fact that the people behind it haven't talked to each other, obviously. And it's one thing to point at the state for being guilty of that. I'm sitting in an organization where we repeat that same exercise over and over again. I think there's as many or more silos in my organization, even at a very small level. I don't talk to the people upstairs except for I see them at a conference in Europe or something like that. I'm totally guilty of that. So one of the challenges that I see is it's a social structure and it's our tendency to work in our networks and to be somewhat siloed or entirely siloed depending on who we are and how we operate. A lot of these things happen in silos. And one of my first internships when I was at the University of Arizona as a graduate student was working for a county agency in an effort to understand what their potential pollution sources are, and I actually hand-entered a whole bunch of businesses from the Yellow Pages into a database, and we had to decide on which software to use, and there was a lot of hand entry from printed material into databases. There was proprietary databases and formats, and for much of the last 20 years, a lot of decisions that we've made in my research group is which software do we use and what format do we use. And living in a world of silos, that has led to all these different things that are out there that don't really, it's very difficult for these things out there to talk to each other because they're in proprietary formats. And the internet and the next wave of internet, I hope, offers an opportunity to go beyond this. And what I would challenge the data people in here with is knowing about the silos and knowing that people tend to have their own favorite way to enter data, to process data, to keep their data. What the internet can do is it can melt down the boundaries without people necessarily knowing. Where if we can find ways for all of these favorite things that people create that they can talk to each other, and the internet can find these things, like Google finds all this information on the internet that I didn't know was out there until Google did it. If you can do the same thing with data, with research bits and pieces, and allow people to then, like the drinking water community, to create custom portals that go out and collate those data on a live basis to put it together for a particular purpose, we can make a big step forward and facilitate. I think that's where the biggest facilitation needs to happen in making a lot of data that are available in my group, in my department, in my university, available to the public more easily, and the same in state agencies. And if you can find ways to facilitate that process and make it easier, especially for people that don't have the time and money to invest in becoming data gurus, to actually collate the information they need, including the number information, the data information, would be terrific.
I agree with that one completely. Really well said. And I have to say, I come at it from, there are multiple levels. One is how do you make that data talk, pierce the walls and talk to each other and translate so folks who know what they're doing can use it. How can you also democratize the data so that it's more accessible to more people, slightly different? And then how do you create the visualization tools and other things that make it easy for folks to do customizable reports for their neighborhood? I mean, it's not totally, I remember when I was at EPA in the 90s funding Earth 911, which was a guy who had a program so that you could put in your zip code and figure out what every environmental program were to take, everything from your tinfoil to your car to whatever, what it was. And that was in the in the 90s. And so there are all kinds of translation tools and others that are important. So it's also the how do you make things accessible at a level that's useful to people's lives. And then there's that other train, which is how do you get the information translatable into something so that even those folks in the silos can't avoid seeing the connections, I think. And that becomes important. I don't want, this is going to sound wacky, but we talk about silos, and thank you for mentioning the academic. It's true in the nonprofit world and everywhere. It's sort of a strange thing we do to want to control data just at a human level. It becomes more complex in state government because there are all kinds of rules you get tied up in. And I'm not saying be compassionate to a bureaucrat day is there, or you said buy a bureaucrat a beer. It's hard to work within those systems because you have so many rules. You never get the funding you need, and when you try to think creatively, someone's trying to whack you down. I want to acknowledge Joaquin Esquivel, who's our newest state board member. In addition to him just being this wonderful, smart human being, he has a background in technology, IT, etc. And he came in and said, you know, our website's a little unwieldy. I think I'd like to take whack. I was like, oh, bless you, bless you. I was probably genuflecting. I was happy because I agreed with him on what he was seeing, but I have no clue how you would even start. And so now at least we have on the board some acumen to even help staff that have been doing a great job. But I do think there's the different levels, whichever one gets you excited. It's what are the levels where you can make the data more accessible and mine it for things we don't even know are there, but then show what it shows so we can't avoid the inconvenient, which is again, a little be political and important in institutions, but also help us prioritize what is a dizzying array of problems and potential opportunities. But again, that democratization so that you also have the slice that's making it so that nonprofits and community members and, you know, anyone in the community who's under 25 can probably do a lot more of this than the rest of us who are a little older. I'm kind of the SPSS generation. That's how far back I go, and some of you don't even know what I'm talking about.
Well, we mentioned the yellow pages a few minutes ago.
So I just want to follow up a little bit on your thoughts. I am a co-PI on a new DOE digital library called ESS Dive. It's a data archive, and I've also worked on data teams for various DOE projects. So I've sort of dealt with this data silo sort of issues, and I think one of the most important things to think about when you're designing these systems is to make sure you give attribution to where your data is coming from, because that really, really is important for the people who are collecting the data and providing this data. We've started issuing data DOIs for a lot of our data sets so that we can not just cite and give credit where it's due, but also be able to trace the provenance of your data analysis and make sure that, we understand what the underlying data sets is, because you're gonna, it's never gonna be perfect, and you're gonna have to do your own massaging to the data, do some quality checking, transformations, to be able to produce whatever visualizations and analysis you need. Tracing the data from the raw data to your products is actually very important, something we've been working about and thinking about for a long time now.
And if I can just add to that, make it easy to add, make that data source attribution, make it obvious and put it in front of people's faces so it's clear that this needs to be part of this piece. So I thought one of the things that I wanted to add to this is some really specific challenges that I see with respect to the safe drinking water community. Most of the water, when we think about drinking water, we drink water either out of a stream or we drink water that comes out of a well, and the latter being groundwater. When we drink water out of a stream, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and by extension the State Water Resources Control Board that Felicia is the chair of, there's a whole lot of very rigorous standards in terms of the treatment that needs to occur when you pull water out of a stream and you serve more than 2 households with that water. To some degree that goes for groundwater, but it's actually a lot cheaper to pull water out of the ground because generally it's not quite as exposed to a sudden pollutant risk as surface water is. And so the regulations for serving groundwater as drinking water are, I don't want to say less stringent, but there's less need for treatment to occur in many cases. And so communities prefer to actually pull groundwater out because it's cheaper to access and cheaper to serve. The smaller the communities are, the more likely they are to serve groundwater rather than surface water for that exact reason. Plus, we are in a very dry, relatively dry state, and we typically have access to groundwater much closer than we have access to surface water. And so most of our small water systems and all the private households that are out there are living off of groundwater. One of the challenges that I face in trying to understand the water quality that may be associated or may be coming towards the wells that serve these small systems and these domestic well systems is that I can't link the information about well construction, which sits in the Department of Water Resources, with the information of water quality, which most of it sits in the State Water Resources Control Board, and they actually have a database where they try to kind of collate most of the water quality data, and there's more out there. But the crosswalk between the database that holds the information on the wells, including the construction information, including from what depth the water is actually being pulled. And the groundwater system is a three-dimensional system. It's not a map. It's a three-dimensional system. And in different elevations, there's different water quality. So I actually like to know when I see a water quality sample, and I know from the location on a map where it's pulled from, I like to know the third dimension, the depth from which it was pulled. And so I'd like to see some way to crosswalk between the well construction information that sits in the Department of Water Resources and the water quality information. The most obvious crosswalk or Rosetta Stone or whatever you call it would be that there'd be some identifier for the well that uniquely identifies the water quality sample and where it came from, and an identifier for the wells with the construction information that's the same. And then I just look up that identifier and I put the two together. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist. So a student of mine did 200 domestic wells, they did water quality sampling, and then they tried to go to the Department of Water Resources and find the construction information. And they were somewhat successful, but it took them probably and they happened to have been at the location where the well was, so they knew a lot about the location of the well. If there is some fancy machine learning algorithms that you guys can figure out that could help with that crosswalk, the amazing piece to pull together to help understand water quality in that three-dimensional groundwater domain and help us better predict what may be happening to these communities and where the cleaner water is and where the water quality problems are. And another idea for a good data challenge, if you're looking for guinea pig to bust the silos, I'm offering my department and my campus as a guinea pig.
My dream is an amazing optical character recognition algorithm that can pull dark data out of PDFs, because that would really get us so much more data if we can.
Terrible handwriting.
That would really be amazing if we're data.
And this has been said before, but I want to emphasize the importance of it. And then I have one other kind of a different thing to toss out there if it's something of interest to you. But the one thing that's been said before that needs to be said over and over again is, as you identify the things you would need to get at, like where you have you're hitting a wall and you have a concept that seems obviously helpful, but you can't crosswalk it for a reason, identifying what the most important ones of those are is important, because that also helps us prioritize what we ask for, what we, in some cases, get the governor to order all the departments to do, or that legislation identifies, because there's an infinite number of things. And what ends up happening is there are some folks who can only think about it in terms of the huge matrix of everything that would make for a perfect information world, which overwhelms everybody and won't happen and be very expensive. So prioritizing those places where a particular tool or bit of information or linkage could make all the difference gives us, some of us, a laundry list to go for either in legislation or even executive order or even just direction. So don't be shy about identifying things that you can't get to that you think you could get to if you had something else that would be important. The other thing to toss out in your thinking is the institutional infrastructure. And I don't have a set idea about this, but a sense of where there is a need for further evolving discussion in a sort of a chaos theory sort of evolving way, which is the intense fragmentation of our water system. We don't have a water system. We've got, surface water is managed differently than groundwater for some of the reasons that Thomas said. There's also just the size and scale. So just to give you just a few stats, there are 411 large urban water agencies. They serve, let's say 3,000 people a year. That's really not very big. There are thousands of public water agencies that serve more than 25 people more than 60 days, or can be a truck stop in some cases. Let's say, take out the truck stops and all of that, but if you include trailer parks and small communities, you still have 2,000 or 3,000 small entities that are regulated. Then you have the ones who serve less than 25. There are thousands of those, but we don't regulate them. They're regulated by a county if they're regulated by a county. And then you have untold thousands of domestic wells. In some cases where people wanted to move away from places, or people who won't let us sample their wells even if we offer to do it for free. And our GAMMA program, which you see the maps on where there are toxic hits, that's an effort both with USGS and other partners, things we paid for, but also offering to test for free. But there's a thing with some folks, it's hands off my well, hands off my car, hands off my septic system. It's not totally rational. It's rational in some ways, it's emotional in others, but there are thousands of those as well. And so it's a very fragmented system with nobody regulating 80% of it in terms of what they have to do. We've made some progress with efficiency regulations and some things through the course of the drought and beyond. We clearly regulate for the quality that comes out the tap on the constituents. We regulate in testing for CECs and other things. Caffeine's not as big a problem as we thought, yay! But for the moment, but that can end up being wrong in another 10 or 20 years. So there's all kinds of quality things, but it's very difficult in that institutional infrastructure to get to everything. It's sort of like the institutional analog to the three-dimensional nature of groundwater, where folks will think if there's something here, then it's going to contaminate water thousands of feet below. Maybe yes, maybe no, depends on the geology. So all of the groundwater issues just depend, and so it's a customized view wherever you are. So it does become very difficult to make generalizations, but again, the more info we have, even at a gross level, the more likely we are to start picking off the problems that we can solve.
We are technically out of time. My husband, who's our timekeeper, has informed me. Do we want to open it up for at least a question or two from the audience?
Yeah, I think we could take one question. Please be aware you are on live stream.
Anybody have a question they'd like to ask of this illustrious panel?
Hi, my name is Yongshin Sun. I work for Stantec. I'm talking about the silo issue. Can you comment on that, the progress made in the SIP 55 and the federation of all the data set? What progress that may be making, how that may be helping?
I'm actually really glad you asked that question. Unfortunately, I'm probably the best person up here to answer it.
She lies awake at night thinking about it.
And actually, so does our team of staff folks over there. And as we've been talking about this, I will just say a few words. In my time in state government, the team that is working on AB 1755 is the most, or the least siloed team I've ever worked with. There's a wonderful team across all of our agencies that have water-related and ecosystem-related data. And this data challenge is giving us the opportunity to test our newly federated systems, and to give you all the opportunity to provide us feedback, so over time we can iteratively make improvements. And they're super enthusiastic about really making this a collaborative process with folks who are trying to use the data, because you're the ones who are going to tell us we can come up with the best idea in the world about how things should work. And it might work great for us, but we really want to make sure that the data is being provided in a way that it's useful to folks who need to be able to get it and use it for various purposes. So I do just want to give the three of you any shout out of something that I should say that I haven't said. Are we good? Yeah. There is a whole process, and there is if you Google AB 1755 and Department of Water Resources, there is a web page that'll give you all the most up-to-date information.
So I was part of some of the workshops that the DWR and the state had organized last year on AB 1755 and worked on the use cases that drive some of the needs for this open and transparent water data system. And I think it's just done a phenomenal job so far, even just producing the reports that I've seen. So I'm really hopeful that this is going to come together in a really great way. And I know that they're thinking about test beds and other things going forward. So this is really exciting to see come together. And really, again, a shout out to all of you for putting that in. I just also want to quickly maybe give some inspiration to people here, sort of working from a lab that's actually largely funded by Department of Energy. I can't help but draw parallels to the energy sector, when you're starting to think about tools and how, they have managed to sort of come up with so many real world tools that impact both regulators as well as the public utilizing their energy data. So if you look at the energy space, they have smart meters, metering studies, lots of building simulation tools that are built on top of that. They have grid modeling. They do all sorts of things. And I just it would be amazing if we had equivalent tools for water and for being able to make rapid decisions that we need for SGMA and implementation of other laws. I think it would be really great if we could come up with some tools similar, just so.
And this is a fantastic venue for that cross-pollination. We have such a diverse group of folks here, on the live stream, on the Slack channels. I noticed even, a few days before this, John Gage, one of the early employees of Sun Microsystems, was on there, rolling up his sleeves, preparing data sets and asking questions and getting immediate responses on Slack. I think the sort of social protocol and how long you can wait to respond to a Slack message is a little bit of an issue sometimes, but for this case, it's really helpful. If you have a question, you put it out there, there's probably someone in the community or somebody that person knows who can help out. So this is really, in terms of all the different communities that we've engaged with at the Hub, I see it as a unique blend of bringing all of these different experts together, and the accessibility is just amazing. So thank you for that, and let's thank our speakers for joining us this morning.
Yes, so thank you all. You may all return to your seats, and I will ask Horacio to come up. As Horacio is coming up here, I did also just want to mention that we've been doing data challenges as a state. The State Water Resources Control Board has done at least 2 or 3 of them. And one new component this year, you can pick whichever seat you like, Horacio. One new component we have this year are commitments. I don't know, Meredith, if you could quickly put up all the logos. Go ahead and sit down, Horacio. And I did just want to point out that is also a product of this new collaboration we have with the West Big Data Innovation Hub. That is their brilliant idea about how to create opportunities for folks who may not actually want to do a data challenge, do a project, but who want to contribute in some way. So again, thank you, Meredith and Big West Data Hub for that. Now it is, you need a microphone. Here, I'll give you this one and I'll follow that. right. So it is my pleasure to introduce Horacio Amezquita, who is the general manager of the San Gerardo Cooperative. And I have known Horacio, how many years do you think? More than 10, right? More than 10 years. I had the privilege of meeting Horacio back in the day when San Gerardo had lost access to safe drinking water. And so we had our sleeves rolled up in the trenches, trying to figure out how to make that right. Horacio, you grew up in Mexico and moved to California in the 70s, is that right? 1974?
Yeah.
1974. And you've lived at San Gerardo ever since then, is that right too?
5 years later, we built that community. It took us like 3 or 4 years to build it. We built about 60 houses. It was for farm workers' family that they have a way of buying a home. So it took us for about 4 years, 3 years, and it was done by voluntary work. So, but we have problems with water, like around 1990. We moved in 79, but in 1990, our first well was contaminated. In 1993, our second well was contaminated. In 2001, our third well was contaminated. And then they looked for more water, but it was so contaminated. There was no more water under our property. So they put us in bottled water for like 5, 6 years. And they were giving us 25 gallons, but then they said it was too much water, so they gave us 15 gallons a week. And it was never enough because we have to cook and we have to brush our teeth, and so we have to go and buy more water. We have to buy cans to make the trip worth going to Salinas and bring as much cans as we can. So it was difficult times. We also had, besides nitrate, we have TCP. It's a trichloropropane that is used in pesticides. And I think the nitrates in the TCP make us sick just by showering. We were just, my mom was, she was just having all kinds of rashes, her skin getting red. Most of the kids, they're the ones that were suffering more. So we went to the county and asked them for help, and there were 4 girls from this University of Santa Cruz that came and did a survey. And because the doctors did not know what was happening, so these girls, they came by and kind of figured out that it was probably the water that was making us sick. So the county sent some registered nurses, and they didn't want to say it was the water, but they said that something was happening in San Gerardo. So they, the board of supervisors, they put a filtration system where they had to go through 2 processes. One was taking the nitrates and then take the TCP. And then the TCP, they have to take it away because it was a dangerous chemical. And as soon as they put in the filtration system, our sicknesses went away. But it was too expensive for the county to maintain the water system because it was, it cost about between $15,000 and $18,000 a month. And the county, they went and applied for the San Gerardo community for a grant, and it was granted through the help of the Obama administration and the State Water Board. It was a federal and state grant, and they built a new system. In 2010, we were able to have water, clean water, and now we have a good clean water. The only thing that is, we still have to face high rates We used to pay like $20, and now we pay around $100 per month. And people, we have like 10 families that they only get like $700 a month for food and water, electricity, gas, rent, medicines. So for those families are the ones that I kind of have to watch over them because they're the ones that need more help. So the co-op is subsidizing the rent because if we don't subsidize the rent, they won't be able to make it. So 2 years ago, the county wanted to raise the rates again. So we started complaining. And then like 3 months later, they said, well, we're gonna sell the system. We're losing money. We don't have staff to run the system. So I told them, just give it to us and we'll take care of it. And they said, no, that's not how it works. You have to go through the process. So they put it for sale, and then we went to the state water board and said, look, we want to get the water system because the water system was built for the community, not for the county. And the state water board is, they're looking into it, but it's going like already 2 years, and it takes too much time, and we have other things, for 10 years, we were not able to refinance our project. And as soon as we had clean water, the banks right away, they said, okay, we can refinance now. And now we're saving about $70,000 a year that we can use in the housing project because we need roofs, we need roads, and we need to subsidize the people that cannot pay the rent. So I hope, I'm not sure, but I hope the State Water Board give us the okay to be qualified to operate the system, and also hope that the county will work with the State Water Board so they know that the water system is in the hands of the people that uses the water, because the cheapest way to run a water system is if you use it for public. If you use it for private, it's going to cost you more. And there's the way it is running now is too expensive for the county, and we think the San Gerardo community, we think that we can run it cheaper. And also we run our wastewater system, which we're also trying to see if we can get a feasibility study and recycle about 9 million gallons of water. We also have other projects that we can incorporate solar systems and wind systems that we can use the energy of natural energy instead of using fossil fuels. So we have a pretty good way of doing projects, but we don't have that much money. In order to make projects, you need money. There's a lot of disadvantaged communities in our area that, they've been there for 20, 30 years, and so far, they're still using contaminated water from nitrates, arsenic, seawater intrusion. There's a lot of things happening in the valley because we are over-extracting so much water, in order to produce food for all the people in California, for all the people in the United States, and a lot of food that is going also out of the United States, and it's to the sacrifice of the valley. So the more we have technology to grow 2 crops, 3 crops, 4 crops a year, we are increasing the amount of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. So I'm afraid that the water contamination that is happening with so many chemicals that we are introducing, that the spreading of the contamination is going forward. It's not going back. The more I see the wells that I know how they, if you start like before, they used to use 45 parts per million. Well, most of the wells are over 100. So we have to do something. We have to mitigate the amount of chemicals that can percolate into the groundwater. We have to find out exactly how can we manage the water without wasting it. Because in our area, the amount of overextraction of the water is pretty high. And the communities that live there are the ones that are paying the price. So, we need data that can, like Art was saying, where you can know exactly how much water you're extracting, at what level are you extracting, how much you're using all year, and what kind of pollutants you have, if you have pollutants. Because if we don't have this data, we're not going to know how the water contamination is spreading from one aquifer to another one. It's pretty important that we know each well. I think all the water should be public. I think all the water should be available to see where the contamination is, where you click it in on your computer and you get all that information there, and you know from one well to another well where the contamination is happening, because it's very important that we know, otherwise how are we going to protect the people? And not only the people, we have microorganisms that are getting killed. We have other living organisms, living animals that are getting killed by pesticides, by fertilizers, by companies that make up chemicals. I think we are putting too much faith in chemicals. We should not do that. We should live the more natural that we can. Instead of growing synthetic fertilizers, maybe I use more organic matter. There's a lot of things, that we need to do, but it takes a long time to tell you. So, what we need from the state, from the legislation, we need probably $100 million to $500 million a year in order to the State Water Board have the help right here and say, let's create jobs, let's fix our water systems, and do it, and not be postponing, because the State Water Board has the willingness to help, but if you don't have funds, what are they going to do?
In Horacio, you're talking about some activity that's happening in the legislature, is that right?
Right. I hope it passes, and I hope there's, because if you think about it, the state produces billions and billions and billions of money of the natural resources from California, and we don't have money to fix the contamination that is left behind, and the people that don't have money to fix it, they stay there for 20, 30 years using contaminated water. Just think about it. If you're a mom and you have 2 or 3 kids, are you going to be watching for them not to drink the water? It's very difficult. So I worry about the kids because I seen it how, you know, they running around the streets and if they're thirsty, they just go grab the water wherever it is, and they don't know that it's contaminated. So it's pretty difficult. And especially, it was not just disadvantaged communities that were facing water contamination. Now the water contamination is spreading to the cities. Seawater intrusion is spreading in. This is a matter of public health, and it should be treated as public health. And everybody has to cooperate, all the people in California, not just the State Water Board, not just the government, everyone. Because if we don't have clean water, there's not much of a life. Water is what makes industries to make money. And I think industries should put money back because that's where they're making their business. And I know it sounds kind of like it doesn't work, but I think it works. If people in the companies that make money, they should put money because they're making money, and protect the people. People and the environment are very precious, and that should be our priority because, you know, people that don't have the problem with water contamination, they don't see that much of a problem. But once you're inside that problem, then you don't even sleep. Especially women, the mothers, they're always worrying about their kids. So I just want to tell you that we have to protect water at any cost. Water is our main natural resource that belongs to everybody. You know, we're part of nature. We, you know, even the air and the soil, we have to take care of them. Otherwise, we're gonna be probably a sick society of all the chemicals that we're creating. So, you know, our main problem in our community was housing, but now since we start having water problems, I've been involved with water ever since. We start working with many grassroots, with the IRWM that tried to make plans, the new TSA agencies that need to be formed. So I see that water quality needs to be taken care of and not just the quantity. Because if you have a lot of water but it's so polluted, it's not much of a gain for the people. So I think we need to conserve water. We need to recharge our aquifers, and you know, and protect water, because that's what makes industries run. That's what makes us, you know, our body is about 68% of water. Most of the fruits that are going out into the agriculture are about 70-90% water. So everything that we're exporting is water.
So I think we have time for, oh, I see the time sign. One question. Chard?
Thank you for sharing. That was really, I want to understand, so for the perspective of the data people here, is there a particular figure or, you know, sort of visualization that, you know, you would like to see that maybe would help you understand maybe what the problems are in your community or help you, think about what you can do next. What would you like to see coming out of this challenge? And what type of data would you like to see used?
I think we need to make sure that every well gets tested. That's the first thing, because a lot of people don't want to test their wells because they don't want to devalue their property. And first, that's the main thing. And second, we need data that it shows each well in every, either by square mile, or the closest the better, because that way you know at what level are you pulling water, whether you're going 1200, 600, 400, 180. There's places that you can grab it at 30 feet. And know if each well is polluted. By having this data, and you have a team well here, you can know how water contamination is moving into other wells that are not contaminated. So we need data that shows the depth. Also, it will be a good idea to show the amount of extraction, so we know how much water we're using, and make sure that the water is tested and we can see what kind of water we have in each well, and that will cover a lot of things. You can know exactly how if the water is getting. If you're mitigating the amount of pollution, that's one thing, or if the amount of contamination is moving to places where it was not contaminated before. So I think that will be good, because in each area is different. Many areas that are not in agriculture, they face different problems. So sometimes they don't face as much problems because they pull in clean water. But this will solve a lot of issues that so far we don't know which wells are contaminated, and there's thousands. And a lot of people don't want to face it, but we have to face it. No matter how bad it is, we have to face it. Otherwise, we're going to be hiding it. Just put it aside, and that's not a good thing. We need to be clear. We need to be transparent on the quality of our water and the quantity, because a lot of industries are using a lot of water. I think that's probably.
All right, well, thank you so much, Horacio, for sharing your story, and you'll be here the rest of the day, so folks can continue to ask questions, and there are many more folks out there like Horacio, and I just would shout out to, well, if you are a person here who is connected to communities like Horacio's, could you just stand up so people know who you are? So I'm thinking Jennifer and Alessandra and Jonathan, London, yeah. All right, yeah, so get a good look at these folks and make sure that you reach out to them and talk to them, because they can help you connect with other communities like Horacio's. All right, thank you. So it is now a break time. Meredith, can you remind me how long the break is?
It was supposed to be until the hour, but we'll do like a 10 to 15-minute break so we can see. This is the end of the live streaming portion, though. So I know that all the folks who have made it on Angie's, hopefully not too Blair Witch Project live stream, will appreciate if we do a scan and wave so they feel that they're in the room. Thanks everyone for joining via live stream. And we are going to be still capturing the recording of the different commitments from the community, so you'll be able to catch that. But I think Angie's arm probably needs a break. She was using 2 phones at one time. So thanks so much. We'll have a break and come back in about 15.
Thank you.